I'm gonna pull the whole thing down. I'm gonna bring the whole fucking diseased, corrupt temple down on your head. It's gonna be biblical.
Hello and happy Monday. Welcome to Patriots Across the Pond Monday Respect. We are here at episode 5, and I've got Stu, my partner in truth, and today we welcome Michelle Peterson. How are you guys?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Michelle.
Thank you.
Great. Well, we want to thank you for being here. You've got a heck of a story, and your battle is still going on, but I thought I would just read a little bit about you and tell our viewers more about what your journey has been all about. So in 2010, Michelle Peterson's son, Andrew, was groomed by a trusted teacher. And rather than stay silent, Michelle fought a 3-year battle that resulted in the first grooming conviction in the United States. That case is now being used to help prosecute grooming and trafficking rings nationwide. And you can visit her website, which is michellepeterson.org, because on the site she shares Andrew's story and she gives a lot of information and how for parents to equip them and support lawmakers as they advance Andrew's law and related grooming legislation. So, wow, what a journey.
Yeah, it's been a crazy ride, that's for sure. Sometimes I'm like, I don't even know how I got here. But God, right? That puts something terrible in your life and then turns it around for something good. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I know that, Michelle, you had said that one of the best things we could do for this show is maybe to show the news clip that you did with NBC as a kind of a launching pad for the rest of the show.
Yes. And what I'll do is kind of set that up a little bit. So this was a clip that was done after trial, and my son in this video is 19. When he started texting my son, he was 15. So it took us 3 years to get this guy convicted. So my son looks a little bit older in this video for that reason. But yeah, this was actually after he finished his first 3 semesters of college. So that's when this video took place.
Got it.
And how long ago was this video clip?
So he started texting him in 2010, and then we went to trial in October of 2013.
Excellent. Okay. Right, let me just take those comments off the screen for a minute and we'll play this.
NBC5 investigates. Imagine discovering that your teenager has been receiving thousands of text messages from a teacher, many sexually explicit, dozens in the middle of the night. You might believe your child would tell you if this happened, but as NBC5's Phil Rogers discovered, that's not always the case.
The story unfolded here in Morris, southwest of Chicago, as middle America as it comes.
He wanted to make a sex video, put it straight out there.
Andrew Kozik says he had begun texting Stefan Belegno, a teacher here at Morris High School, because he was having trouble on the baseball team. But before long, he says Belegno was offering him money for oral sex.
It started off at $500 and then $1,000 and then $1,500.
But Andrew never told anyone, and no one knew until his mother heard him talking to Belegno on the phone.
He has no business calling you at 11 o'clock at night. That's completely inappropriate.
When she learned the two had been communicating by text message, Andrew's mother went to her computer and logged into the family's account. She found thousands of messages.
I was just sick because I knew in my heart, I'm like, this isn't just regular text messaging.
The family went to police, who searched Andrew's phone and found nearly 6,000 messages between the two. But only about a tenth of those could be recovered. And indeed, they are troubling. We can't read some of the more graphic messages, but among the more benign, the teacher writes, "When does the kissing begin? Icky," the student says. "How about if we just go at it and not video it?" the teacher declares. And on another occasion, "When you're 18, we can give each other everything."
Sometimes males to bond with males are crude.
Raymond Wigel is Belegno's lawyer. He insists the teacher was only trying to help Andrew through a bullying incident on the baseball team.
You say that these text messages do not indicate criminal activity. They certainly indicate stupidity for a teacher to be sending these messages.
Absolutely.
Wigel says he and his client concede bad judgment, but they point to the thousands of other texts no one read, as well as huge gaps in the transcripts.
There's a stupid intent, but there was not an evil intent to have sex with this young man.
I don't care what context you put it in. When you offer somebody money for sex, that's solicitation.
So why didn't Andrew tell someone? Records show at one point he even told a DCFS investigator the teacher's messages had not crossed the line.
Why'd you tell him?
I didn't want to lose his job. I didn't want him to get in trouble.
Belegno was found guilty of indecent solicitation of a minor and unlawful grooming. He is to be sentenced next month.
I want him to have to register as a sex offender. The jail time would just be icing on the cake.
Michelle Peterson says she and her son wanted to talk to us to stress the importance of reporting incidents like this. 18 of these texts were after midnight, 15 after 3 a.m. The Grundy County State's attorney says he believes it's a cautionary tale about giving children digital technology this Christmas without firm guidelines on how it will be used.
Well,
yeah. So, but I think the biggest thing that people need to understand, first of all, is what grooming is, right? So you have normal grooming where you groom someone to be of good moral character, or you groom someone to become a CEO of an organization. But this is unlawful grooming, whereby somebody's trying to entice and coerce someone to gain their trust so they can do something nefarious to them. And typically it's somebody in a position of authority or somebody older going after a child, and usually it's to have sex with that child. So that's what this was pertaining to. Now, the judge actually named this, instead of grooming, he named it unlawful grooming in the final paper that he put out. So, but that set precedent in the country as the very first unlawful grooming conviction in the United States. So everything, though, you listen to a lot of these survivor stories, all of it starts with grooming. So that's why this is so important, to try to stop this before they actually touch the child or defile them. So this guy is lucky he didn't touch my kid, because I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. But my son, I mean, this has been a long standing thing, right? My son's going to be 32 this Saturday. So he's almost the same age as the teacher was when he started grooming him. The teacher was 34 and my son was 15. And as that said, it started off with a grooming incident on the baseball team. And in May of 2010 is when he started texting him. And just to preface this a little bit further, they don't just groom the child, they groom the community, they groom the family. And it's typically not the white van syndrome, right? It's somebody that you know. So it's a family member, a neighbor, teacher, clergy, somebody that is within your circle. So in May of 2010, I'm a physical therapist. I was actually in this guy's house treating a family member for home health physical therapy when he started texting my son in May of 2010. And I was also coaching softball at the same school where he was coaching baseball. So he knew me as a parent, as a colleague, and also as a healthcare provider. Probably never ever thinking that I would ever come after him. So I'm not aware of any of this going on until I overhear a phone call in October of 2010. And I had come home late from a funeral, knocked on my son's door about 10:30 at night to tell him good night, and he was already sleeping. So I left the room, went about my business, getting ready for work the next day. And the way our house is set up, I'm walking past his room back and forth to get things ready for the next day. And then about a half hour later, I hear him really annoyed on the phone saying, I don't know how often you want me to call you. You know that I'm working 2 jobs. I'm taking a class in college. So even as a senior or a junior in high school, he was taking an evening class in the local JUCO that we have here, so a junior college, and working a couple jobs. And he was playing baseball in the spring. And then all of a sudden I hear him say, well, I'll just meet you in your classroom tomorrow to pick up those paintballs. And my heart just sunk, and I knocked on his door and I said, who are you talking to? And he told me, and I said, you need to hang up the phone. I said, it's completely inappropriate that he's calling you at 11 o'clock at night. Plus he's a baseball coach. Why is he calling you in October? And so I went, as the video said, immediately to my computer, looked up the phone number that he was just talking to on our cell phone bill, and went back and found thousands of messages between the two of them. There would sometimes be 20, 30 messages coming in from the teacher. My son wouldn't respond for hours, and then he'd finally respond back. And I think he felt like because this guy was in a position of authority, he had to respond. So yeah, it was unbelievable. But that next morning, I took in about 3 weeks worth of text messages that I printed off. Now, again, they weren't the messages. It's just the cell phone bill. So it's the phone numbers back and forth, right? So I took those into the principal and set him on his desk. And I said, I think we have a problem. The principal sat back in his chair and just let out a huge sigh. And he goes, I just gave him a teacher's award 2 weeks ago. So it was almost like that immediate, like he knew, right, that something was wrong. He said, I'll meet with both of them today individually and see what this story is. And I went back there that afternoon, and he said they're both denying any wrongdoing, said it was just regular text messaging. And I said, okay, so as a mandatory reporter, are you going to report anything? And he looked at me and he goes, I have nothing to report because they're both denying any wrongdoing. He goes, but you're Andrew's mom. He goes, you can open up a DCFS report anytime you want. So DCFS is the Department of Children and Family Services here in Illinois. And he said, you can open up a report anytime you want. If you need someplace to meet, you can meet here at the school. He told me about 4 different ways in that meeting to call DCFS. I left there, went straight to a local church. And as you can imagine, I was a hot mess. Went and talked to one of the pastors there. Now, I wasn't going to church there, but just needed to talk to somebody. And met with him, and he said, this is really not your call. You should contact DCFS, let them do an investigation. And I still sat on it for about a week because, this is somebody's livelihood you're talking about. This is their life. You want to make sure that what you're seeing, feeling, whatever is true. And the more I thought about it, the more I prayed about it, the more I was like, I need to call DCFS. So I did that. And as you know, Elisa, we have a little bit of a problem with our DCFS system here in the United States, and which can also be Child Protective Services in other states. So I called them, filed a report. They're supposed to be out within 24 hours. So 6 days later, I heard from no one. So I called the local office, and they said the person who has my file is on vacation. I will never forget. This was a Wednesday. And they said she'll be back on Monday and she will give you a call. And so I called the director for Illinois for the Department of Children and Family Services, and she actually picked up the phone. told her what was going on, and I could hear her typing in the background. And she said, "You reported this 6 days ago. They should have been out within 24 hours. I said, "I'm aware. That's why I'm calling you." And she said, "Someone will be out there today. If they're not out there today, please give me a call back." And this was about 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon. So about 10 minutes later, I get a phone call from the local office again, and they said that they would be out the next morning at 8 a.m. They couldn't get somebody freed up to come out that day, which worked better for me. Again, I'm a physical therapist, so I could offload my patients at least and give my son a heads up that they were coming. He had no idea that they would have been coming that day anyway. So I called back to the director for Illinois, left a message this time, and about 10 or 15 minutes later, I got a phone call from the school saying that they were on their way to the school. So she must have called them and said, "You will have someone there today." By the time I got there, they already had my son in a room with a counselor and the representative from DCFS speaking to him. He came out of that office, had no idea they were coming that day. He came out of that office and was so angry with me. If looks could kill, I wouldn't be sitting here today either, because he just wanted this to go away. I think he thought that once I knew that it would just fizzle out and go away. But I've always maintained from the very beginning, this wasn't about us anymore. This was about that next kid. So he walked out, he goes, "You're unbelievable." And he walks out, and I walked in. And the first thing that the representative from DCFS says to me is that, "I don't know why this was so imperative that we came out today. This just seems like benign text messaging." So I handed her the printout that I had from the principal the week before. And I said, "This is just 3 weeks worth. This has been going on since May." So she starts looking, and I said, "You might want to note some of the times that some of those are coming in, how many messages are coming in from the teacher without response back from my son." And she handed it back, and she said, "Oh." So then I kind of laid into her about making me feel bad for making a report. And I told her, I said, "This might not be the worst thing that you've ever seen in your life, but this is the worst thing that I've been dealing with ever. So you should never make somebody feel bad for ever calling you. Now I just need you to do your job and do an investigation." And she said, "Well, we can't really do much on a parent's gut feeling, and he's denying any wrongdoing." So that's what I got from DCFS. So I left there, and I was that mom that would check my son's cell phone. He was 15. I was paying for the phone. He turned 16 that summer, but I was paying for the phone. So I'd check his messages 2 or 3 times a week, thinking I'm doing my due diligence, right? And checking messages, emails, apps, whatever. And because I was doing that, he would delete the messages when they came in. So I never saw one of over 6,000 messages because he would delete them. So at this point, I said, "Okay, this phone's a computer. I got to find somebody who could pull these messages off the phone. They have to still be on the phone somewhere." So I started digging around and doing some research. I talked to one of the detectives here in town. We'd filed a report at that point. And when I found somebody over in Joliet, which is only about 20 miles from where I live, I called him and said, "Hey, I found this guy who can pull these messages off the phone." And he said, "I forgot about him." And he said, "He just did an in-service for us last year." So he's like, "I'll need Andrew's phone out for chain of custody. I will take it to him." So I let him have his phone through the weekend. And that Sunday evening, I said, "I need your phone." I found somebody who could pull those messages off the phone. And his face just went green. And I said, "Is there something you need to tell me?" He goes, "I can't tell you." He wouldn't even look at me. He said, I'll talk to the principal and the detective tomorrow morning." So before he went to bed that night, and I think this is very important for parents to hear and grandparents, we had a talk about suicide. And I told him, I said, "Nothing is ever worth taking your life over." And I said, "You would crush me." So we had that talk, and I said, "Whatever's in those messages, I will have your back. And just remember that this is not your fault. This is an adult, right? And no matter what anybody says to you, this is not your fault, even for engaging with him." This guy was in an authoritative position. So I stayed up pretty much most that night, keeping vigil over his room, making sure he was okay. We went the next morning to the school, and he told them everything. They came out. The principal said, "You were spot on with what you were thinking." And he said, "We'll be opening up our own DCFS investigation at this point." And he said that Andrew wants to tell you himself, and we gave him some ways and some tools to do that. So he said, "I'll be here the rest of the day. If you need to come back and discuss anything, I'll be here." So we went home, and Andrew then told me about how he wanted to make a video with him. He told me about how he'd refer to his body part as my little guy. He would ask him, "Am I ever going to get to see the little guy?" So we went back to the school, and he said, "What did he tell you?" So I told him, he goes, "He didn't even tell you the worst part." He said he offered him money for oral sex, up to $1,500. I was just beside myself. This guy's lucky I have a good head on my shoulders. So at that point, the school put him on paid administrative leave because of the contracts with the teachers. They couldn't just fire him. So he's on paid administrative leave until he's proven guilty or innocent. So they take his phone. They have his phone for about maybe 3 or 4 months with this detective. They couldn't get the messages off the phone because Apple had just done an upgrade, and those service providers do not have to help in any way, shape, or form to get these messages to even the owner of the phone. So that's another law we need to work on. But they then took the phone down to the Illinois State Police, and they had his phone for another few months. So now we're almost a full year after I overheard that conversation. In the meantime, our detective asked for a subpoena for the teacher's cell phone and for his electronics, which got denied by by our state's attorney here in Grundy County. So this all hinged on text messages, and that got denied. And knowing what I know now, I wonder who they were protecting on the inside. You know, as we've done our research over the last few years, that's the first thing that comes to mind. So anyway, they have his phone again for a while, and I'm getting frustrated. And I'm down at the state's attorney's office almost every day. And I met with a Secret Service agent. So one of my friends at the time, her husband was a Secret Service agent. And she said, you need to meet with our other friend who actually is on a pedophile task force. So those of you who don't know, Secret Service here in the United States, if they are not protecting the president, they will work with local jurisdictions on other cases. So they're not just kind of sitting around here doing nothing in each state. They will help out with local jurisdictions. So this guy's on a pedophile task force. I met with him. He said, Michelle, they just want you to go away. This is too much work for one kid. I said, but this is my kid. And he said, I get that. He said, you're going to have to stay in their face the whole time. You're going to, let them know that you're an educated woman. You're not going anywhere. He said, I'm going to give you 2 business cards. Keep one for yourself and take one to the state's attorney's office. Tell them that if they don't have the messages off the phone in the next 7 days, you're going to turn it over to the feds. He goes, I'll have them off of there in 15 minutes. So I did that the next day. And then 3 days later, we had the text messages, which leads me to believe that they had the messages the whole time. Yeah. So my husband and I, who is not my son's father, it's his stepfather, we went to go meet with 2 assistant state's attorneys, which you guys, I guess, in the UK call them solicitors, right? Yeah. So we're in a conference room, and huge conference table. They're on one side, we're on the other, and there's a stack of papers sitting in front of them, probably about 1/4 of an inch thick, probably about an inch or 2 thick. And so they said, we just don't think we have enough to go on. There's too many gaps in the transcripts. We don't think we can charge him with anything. And I looked at him and I said, are those the messages sitting in front of you? And he said, yes. I said, can I look at them? So they both looked at each other like they weren't expecting that. I said, well, here's the deal, you guys. I said, that's my property, and so is the phone. So if you're doing nothing with them, I'm leaving here today with both those messages and the phone. So they pushed the messages over, let me read them. Now, up until this point, I've had maybe 1 speeding ticket. I've never had any dealings with the law or anything like that. So I have no idea how this works. So I've just kind of been following their lead, really compliant, doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And so I start reading these messages, and tears are just dripping from my face because everything that I told you was in there. So while there were gaps in the transcripts where he offered him the money, wanted to make a sex video, referred to his penis as my little guy, and then some, was all in there. So I pushed the messages back very slowly, and I slammed my hands on the table. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. And I stood up, and I was so angry, and I was yelling probably louder than I've ever yelled in my entire life, and which is completely out of my character. I'm usually pretty calm and pretty even keeled, and they were just shocked. And I said, you know, this is unbelievable. You guys aren't doing anything about this. The older gentleman said, if there was just another kid that could corroborate the story. I said, oh, because one's not enough. And I was yelling, and I said, what does he have to do? Sodomize my son before you're going to do anything? And I looked at the younger guy, and I said, you have kids that are going to be going to this school. I said, you're okay with this guy teaching your children? And looked at the older guy. I said, you have grandkids that go to this school. You're okay with this guy teaching your kids? And my husband started kicking me under the table. I said, you kick me one more time, I'm kicking you out that door. Like, I was out of my mind angry. So the one thing, like during COVID, remember how we saw the mama bears, right? You saw the mama bear, the t-shirts with the cub, following behind them. Like, that is not what you look like when you're fighting for your kids, which is why I came up with this logo right here. So It's a grizzly. That's what you look like. That's what I felt like I looked like that day in that conference room. They probably had no idea what to do with me. And my tagline on here says I was a mama bear before it was cool. So we left there, and I said, I want to meet with the actual state's attorney. They said he wasn't available. I said, of course he's not. So I called back at 8:01 the next morning, told them who I was, and that I needed to meet with the state's attorney that day. They said he was busy. I said, well, here's the deal. I'm going to come and pick up everything from your office, the phone and the messages, because you're doing nothing with them. And I'm going to take them to Lisa Madigan's office, who was our Illinois state attorney at the time. And we had another representative who his name is Dennis Hastert, and she was dealing with some of the stuff with him at the time. And he had been our Speaker of the House, but he was also from Illinois and was just charged with molesting some boys on a wrestling team that he was coaching here in Illinois. So that was going on at the same time. The whole thing at Penn State was going on at that time too. So, you know, the whole Jerry Sandusky thing. So this was all going on in the background. So when I told him I was taken to her office, I got a call back 15 minutes later from the actual state's attorney. He said he could meet with me that day. So I printed off an article where he said he came back to Grundy County, which is where I live, to protect the children and families of Grundy County. Now, our courthouse is here in Morris, where I live. So we live in the county seat. The courthouse is literally 5 minutes from the high school. And many of the people in that courthouse, the people that I was talking to, even the state's attorney at that time, went to high school at Morris. So I go in to meet with him, and he said, you know, I'm just not really familiar with what's going on with your case. And now, mind you, we're over a year into this at this point. And I said, I've heard that about you, that you really have no idea what's going on in the county. I said, I find it very hard to believe that you have no idea what's going on with this case when you went to high school at this school, and this teacher was teaching at that school. So I set the article down in front of him, and I said, how about we start doing this? You said you came back to the county to protect the children and families of Grundy County. Let's start doing that. So that kind of set off our tumultuous relationship. And he was not happy with me. And I said, I have it on good authority that there are actually 4 other subpoenas that the Morris Police Department are waiting on for child abuse cases. I'm like, what is happening? Why are you not giving these subpoenas? So the next day, the detective called me. He said, what did you say to him? Because he knew I was meeting with him. And I told him. He said, we just got the 4 subpoenas we've been waiting for our cases. And I said, shocking. And I said, but that doesn't get me anywhere with my case at this point, right? So nothing is happening. I keep going in every day or every other day trying to figure out what's happening, what's going on. And I asked him why. I also asked the state's attorney why he denied the subpoena for the teacher's cell phone and for his computer. And he said, I don't recall doing that. I said, well, you did. You refused it. I said, so we don't have his information now either, because I'm sure his phone is at the bottom of the Illinois River by this point. And so nothing again is happening. So we're sitting on these text messages that they have. They don't charge him with anything. They don't bring him in for questioning. We have no idea what's going on. So a few months go by, and the principal calls me, and he said, I need to meet with you. So I go in there again, and he said that he's been trying to get them to subpoena the teacher's personnel file. He's like, there's things in there that they're going to want to see. And he's like, they won't call me back. They won't subpoena the personnel file. So I go back down to the state's attorney's office. And this time I was in there probably about 3:45. They close at 4:30. And I waited and waited and waited and waited. He wasn't coming out. I wasn't leaving until he came out. So he finally came out, and I asked him about the subpoena for the personnel file. He said, well, what could possibly be in there that we need? I said, what skin is it off of your back? Can you just get it? So he subpoenas the personnel file. The school then calls me, and their attorneys won't release the personnel file to them until I come down and sign off on it. And they use the HIPAA law, which is a law here in the United States that protects minors, so that you can't just give information out about minors without the parents' consent. So I went in and had to sign off on this. Now, this was a meeting that the principal had. He had been a counselor before. So he had a meeting with the superintendent of schools for the high school, with the teacher, and with their union rep. And he flat out asked him, did you ever offer Andrew money for oral sex? Did you want to make a sex video? Did you refer to his body part as my little guy? He said he put his head down, shook his head in affirmation, and said yes. I'm like, we got him, right? So I get up, I give the principal a hug, I go down to the state's attorney's office, and I tell him what was in there. And he said, why'd they let you see it? And he was mad. And I said, because of the HIPAA law. I said, my son's a minor. He said, they didn't have to do that. I said, honestly, I think they let me see it because we know that we're getting nowhere with you down here, and they know the frustration that I've had with you. And he was frustrated with you not getting the subpoena for the personnel file. So he let me see it, because once it got into your hands, I'd probably never know what was in there. So now that I do, if he's not arrested within the next 7 days, I'm going to have every major news station on your front lawn. So he waited the full 7 days, and then he indicted him and charged him with solicitation of a minor. So he gets out on bond, of course, and then we go to court and we go status hearing after status hearing. And status hearings, for those of you in the UK, these are monthly hearings. So you go in there, figure out what's going on. They were blaming me the entire time. I was just a disgruntled parent, right? And so they were trying to blame me for everything. But I didn't miss one status hearing. I was in there the whole time, and we're getting nowhere fast. So in 2012, we voted in a new state's attorney. January of 2013, our detective meets with him and says, there's a case here that's been hanging out there for 2.5 years. You need to work this case right away. So he meets with us after looking through everything. And now, again, at this point, my son is 18, had already finished his freshman year of college, and tells us that he thinks we're going to have to take a plea bargain because there's too many gaps in the transcripts. There's too much time has left. So when I say you can't remember everything, I was livid. I was so mad after all the work that we had put in.
But a plea bargain? Like, you weren't doing this for money. You weren't doing this you wanted to get this guy away from other children.
Right. So again, plea deal, right? And now the guy would have been on paid administrative leave had he not, I think it was like a year earlier that he asked to resign. And the school did everything right by me. They came to me and said, hey, he wants to resign. We'd like to get him off our books, but we want to clear it with you first. Are you okay with him resigning? And I said, yes, get him off the books. Stop paying this guy. So we then go to court in August of 2013. He's supposed to take a plea deal. And by the grace of God, he decides he wants to take this to trial. The judge lit up his attorney, said, we could have gone to trial this summer while this young man was home from school, because my son was going to school in New Jersey for college. And he's like, now we have to bring him back during the school year in October for the next trial date. He's like, you've dragged this family through the mud for 2.5 years, like lights them up. His attorney actually said, I have a prepaid vacation already the week before we would go to trial. And I don't know that I'll be ready to go to trial. And the judge said, you've had 2.5 years to get ready to go to trial. We're going to trial that Monday. So we leave there, meet with the actual state's attorney then and his first assist. And the first assist comes in and he says, there's a new law that came into play in Illinois. It's a grooming law. It just became active last month. So July of 2013, a grooming law became active in Illinois. He said, everything that's in that law is what he's done to you, your family, and this community. He said, but there's no precedent set. There's no other convictions in the United States, but it's going to be difficult to get, but we're going to go after it. So after doing some research these last few years, I've come to the understanding that that is very unusual for somebody to do that, that it's difficult to get that first conviction. For him to actually go after that took a lot of guts on his part, from my understanding. So we go to court in October of 2013, and he gets convicted of solicitation of a minor and unlawful grooming. So the very first unlawful grooming conviction in the United States. He then appealed and got the solicitation removed. So we have the very first and only to date standalone grooming conviction in the United States. With that, he got 30 days in jail, 30 days in jail. Had to register as a sex offender for only 10 years. So as of 3 years ago, he's no longer in the sex offender registry. He can never teach again in the United States. And he paid like a $2,700 fine. While we were all in counseling for several years, I had my son in counseling right out of the gate. He got discharged probably 6 months later. And I went to the counselor. I said, why are you discharging him? He said, he seems fine. I said, he's not fine. I know my son. My son is very intelligent. And I told him this. I said, don't take offense to this. I said, but he's smarter than you, even at 16. He's playing you and he's telling you everything that you want to hear so that you will discharge him. So that's the other thing that parents need to be aware of too, is these kids will manipulate to be able to get out of the counseling. So first of all, get your kids in counseling if this is going on. Secondly, make sure you stay on top of everything, even if you're not allowed in the room while they're going through their counseling. So my son goes back to school and he's spiraling out of control. He feels completely guilty. He feels like he's cost this guy his job, his livelihood, starts blaming himself. But that's what happens when these groomers are good. They pull on these kids' heartstrings. And my son was a perfect victim. He is very kind-hearted. He will do anything for anybody. He was just young, didn't know when to draw that line and draw the boundary, So he then started going back for more counseling. And all my son has ever wanted to do since the time he was 7 years old was to become a United States Marine. Wanted to enlist right out of high school, couldn't do that because of this. This guy ruined his last 2 years of high school, from his junior year to his senior year. He didn't get to do what he's always wanted to do, was enlist and become a Marine. So he finishes out that school year, goes to school the following year, and he's just really in a bad place mentally, just doesn't want to be at school. He said, Mom, I just want to enlist. And so he then enlisted in the Marine Corps and became a United States Marine for 6 years. And then in 2021, when they started pushing the vaccine, he opted to get out at that point. And, but in the Marine Corps, he had a couple of issues, and he ended up having to go back to counseling again, and had one of the best counselors in there. And she saw right through him. And she said, you're probably one of the most intelligent people I've ever had to deal with. She's like, but you need to tell me really what's going on. And was able to then make him work through some of these things. So it was probably one of the best things that could have happened to him. So fast forward to January 2023, I go to a Clay Clark Reawaken event. I'd been to many of them at this point. I'd come to know several of the people there, come to know General Michael Flynn, who was Trump's national security advisor. I told him about this because I found out about this at a VIP dinner a day before the Reawaken event happened. So I met a trafficking investigator named Amy Coelho out of Texas, and she started telling me about some cases she was working on. One of them just finished up, and it was a 10-year case. It was called the La Luz del Mundo case. So La Luz del Mundo is a church cult here in the United States. They're in, well, not even just in the United States, but they're in, I think, like 64 different countries. And the women in the church prepare the kids in the church for the men in the church. And she was trying to take down a leader of that church. And this is actually a Netflix documentary right now. So it's called something about La Luz del Mundo, but it's on Netflix. And they ended up only being able to get this guy on child abuse and not even trafficking charges. And then she started telling me about a Larry Nassar gymnast that was one of her clients. And then she started telling me about some sex trafficking cells that they busted between Mexico and California. There were like 23 different sex trafficking cells. So I'm like, well, I'm going to tell her about my measly little case here from Illinois, right? So I started to tell her, and she goes, hold on, are you from Illinois? And I said, yeah. She goes, when was that? I said, well, 2010 to 2013. And she grabbed my arm and got tears in her eyes. She goes, I need to get a picture with you and send this to my team. I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, we use your case for every trafficking case that we bust because you have the only grooming conviction in the United States. We have to prove the grooming in order to prove the trafficking. And she goes, I had no idea the story behind your case. She said, we don't even know your son's name. All we have are his initials because he was a minor. She goes, we needed that folder. We needed the file with the conviction so we could use that going forward. No, we were both a hot mess. I was crying. She was crying. Everyone around us was like, what's going on? They start crying. It was just a surreal moment. And I said, so if you're using this for all your cases, she goes, no, you don't understand. Everybody in the United States is using your case for trafficking and for grooming. And I said, so if that's true, could they have used this for the Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein trials? Now, she's also a paralegal. She said, I'd have to look at their case files. She said, but they would have nothing else to use. I was just beside myself, because to think that we could have had a hand in taking down one of the most prolific pedophiles of our time is just unbelievable. And so she said, I think you have the only grooming conviction because people are taking plea bargains. So we need to get something put in place whereby they can't take a plea deal and plea out. And she's like, I'd like to call it Andrew's Law after your son. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, and I want you to write the mission statement for this law. I'm like, did I tell you I'm a physical therapist? I'm like, I don't know what a mission statement for a bill or a law is, right? She goes, figure it out. She goes, because I want it to come from you. So I came up with a mission statement, and she didn't tweak it. She left it exactly how it was. And this was all before AI. So I wasn't using AI for that. So I just did some research and figured it out. And I went and talked to General Flynn, told him what I'd found out. And he's very busy at these events, right? So he wasn't getting the whole gravity of the situation at first, but he's like, my sister, Mary Flynn O'Neill, is here today. She is the CEO of America's Future, and we're going around the country right now doing anti-trafficking summits. But you need to tell her your story. So I meet with Mary. Now, this is, again, the only reawaken that she had been to. So when I tell you God's hand has been all over this from the very beginning, it's been all over it from the very beginning. Like, I couldn't figure out why I had to wait 3 years to get this guy convicted, but we needed to wait on the grooming law, like all of these things, right? And when my son initially, when this happened, he's like, Mom, I don't know if I want to do this. And so I had another conversation with him, and I said, okay, I get that. I said, but this is no longer about you and me. This is about the 3 boys that live across the street, the 4 that live down the street. If something happens to one of them, how do you face their parents knowing that you could have done something to stop it? And I said, God put this in our laps for a reason. So I sent him to bed that night to think about that. And again, kept vigil over his room because, you know, you don't know where they are mentally. Like, I was really worried that he was going to do something to himself and harm himself. And so he came down the next morning and he said, I'm not doing this for you. And I'm not doing this for me, but I'm doing it for the family across the street and the family down the street. And so that's when he decided to come forward. And so back to Mary, I start telling her about this. She goes, you know what, I need your actual case file. She said, we have a case in Tennessee right now that we're trying to work. So I got her the case file. She hooked me up with a paralegal named Allie Hopper out of Florida. Allie has since done some work at the border. She's done some congressional hearings about the trafficking going on at the border here. So you might know Allie's name from that. So Allie starts looking into the criminal code because she's a paralegal and finds that there's no grooming law to amend in Florida to make it so they can't take a plea bargain. So then we took a step back, and then we realized that Illinois was the only state that had a grooming law in place. So then I made it my personal mission to try to get a grooming law in place in all 50 states. So Florida was the first, and she worked very hard there, knocking on doors in Tallahassee, trying to get somebody to sponsor this bill. I flew down and spoke at one of their GOP events. One of the senators that was there came and took me into the side room, asked me to tell him my whole story. And I told him he had been a former pastor, tears in his eyes. He's like, I'll sponsor this bill. So he sponsored the bill, and then it became law in Florida in April of 2024. Concurrently, we were working with another representative out of Iowa. His name is Mark Thompson. Met him through Emily Peterson, who was also another mama bear during COVID, trying to get the masks off our kids during COVID. So I met Mark through her. Allie and I met with him on several Zoom calls. He then took the Florida law and the Illinois law, created the bill for Iowa. And then Iowa then about a month later then had a law put in place for grooming. Arizona then had an issue. They reached out to Florida and Iowa. They then created a grooming law. There was another lady in Georgia who was working on a grooming law for 3 years, and her daughter had been molested and groomed by a YMCA gymnastics coach. And once these other 3 laws fell, Georgia's then fell because now they had precedent, right? And so in 1 year, we got Florida, Iowa, Arizona, and Georgia. The following year, we got Louisiana, Montana. This last year, we got Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Tennessee, and Wisconsin. So in the last several years, we've had at least 10 states go through. Now, because of these other states are falling, it's kind of taking on a life of its own. So Wyoming then put a grooming law through this year, and so did Missouri. And last year, Ohio and Pennsylvania and Texas, I believe. So there's some sort of grooming law put in place in all of those states. Now we need to go back and look at some of these laws because not all of them are great, right? In most criminal codes in each state, they define a child as anybody under the age of 18. In Indiana, they define a child as anybody under the age of 14. So some of these states are looking at age of consent. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a minor and an adult, it's statutory rape. So they define a child in Indiana as anybody under the age of 18 for criminal activities, child abuse, whatever. But when it comes to this and grooming a child for sex, they define the child as somebody under the age of 14. So they're leaving a huge gap of 14 to 18-year-olds wide open. And those are the kids, according to the National Centers for Missing and Exploited Children, that are targeted the most. Montana, though, put through a fabulous law. So the Montana law needs to be model legislation for the entire country. The one thing that needs to be tweaked in their law is also defining a child as anybody under the age of 18. They define a child as anybody under the age of 17. So 16, they're defining as a child. Again, I think they're going by age of consent. So in Montana, though, if you groom a child under the age of 13 for sex, it's 100, and you're convicted, it's 100 years in prison, no chance of parole for the first 25. And if they get out at 25 years, it's a lifelong satellite surveillance by ankle monitor. Now, if they also groom a child who is 16 years of age to 14 years of age, It could be 4 to 100 years in prison. Again, it would be the same stipulations, no chance of parole. And if they do get out, it'd be a lifelong satellite surveillance. So I met with a federal representative out of Indiana named Erin Houchin. She's from Indianapolis. And I asked her if she'd be willing to sponsor a federal grooming law, because there is a federal grooming law, which, like, if they cross state lines, that would come into play. So if you have somebody in Iowa, for example, grooming somebody in Montana, and it's crossing state lines, even if it's by internet or by phone, that would fall under federal jurisdiction. So there's a federal grooming law already in place, but it's an adjunct charge. So they have to be charged with something else for the grooming to be charged. Typically, the grooming gets dropped because whatever they are charged with has stiffer penalties. So when her team looked into this, she said, would you be willing to write a federal grooming bill? And I'm like, sure. I'm like, oh, again, I don't know how to do this, right? But now AI is here. So I took the Montana law, threw it into AI, and I actually asked it to add some other things into that law, such as the no plea bargains, defined what a child was as under the age of 18, also put in there a stipulation for people with mental disabilities of any age being groomed for sex, that it doesn't matter what age they are, that would still would fall under grooming. So that is all in the federal grooming bill. And that's also on my website. So if you go under Andrew's Law tab on there, the federal bill draft is on there. And what we're trying to do here in Illinois is amend our current law, which would be known as Andrew's Law. And what it would do is make it so there'd be no plea bargains. It would expand the sex offender registry to include places of businesses that are privately owned. So places such as Chuck E. Cheese, Dave & Buster's, Six Flags, or in Florida, Disney, all of those places are free reign for anybody who's on the sex offender registry. Many of those places didn't exist when this law was written back in the 70s. So I want you to include places of businesses that cater all or in part to children on that sex offender registry, and then also expand the sex offender registry to be lifelong. So not just 10 years, but lifelong if you're convicted of grooming and or trafficking a child. So that's what is actually known as Andrew's Law at this point. So we want to, even though we got these other laws put in place, we want to amend those laws to make it so they can't take a plea bargain. Now, I keep getting told that that goes against our constitutional rights. And I said, well, what about the due process and rights of the victim? You do a plea bargain, that victim never has their rights because they're never heard in court. That person gets out in a plea deal. They don't do time. They do 30 days in jail, right? And so even if we can't get it so they can't take a plea bargain, I want to make it at least a minimal penalty. So if somebody is convicted of grooming, that they would have to do a minimum of 5 years in prison. They can't plea down from that. So that's the other thing that we're looking at. So that's kind of our whole story in a nutshell. So if you guys have questions, which I'm sure you do, I'll open for that.
Go, Elisa, go. You're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry. I don't know if I have a question. I have more of a comment. What the psychological implication with kids is that they're not fully developed. So, their frontal cortex, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but I know it doesn't fully develop till you're like 25, 26 years old. So that alone, when you're dealing with 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, they are still very, they don't have their confidence. They don't understand things the way they need to. I mean, look, we're parents. We know even when we're trying to tell kids something, they think we're crazy anyway, right? Stop. Why do you have to do that? You're embarrassing me. And that's on, benign kind of stuff, right?
Right.
So when you're talking about these serious offenses, they still don't really have the capacity to separate and look at this for what it really is. And their emotions are involved and their guilt and their, and so what you went through with Andrew, I can't even imagine, because I think about the arguments I have with my kids over things that I'm trying to get them to protect themselves, and then they're fighting against you. So something like this that had such implication across the board, and I'm going to use this word, but embarrassment, right? You're in a spotlight, mom is nuts. And it just took such tenacity. And honestly, to your son's credit, for him to be able to actually separate out his emotions and view it as the good for, the whole and for society really says something about his character.
Right. When I met Amy and I told her the whole story, she goes, Michelle, you did the one thing that most parents don't do. She goes, you got told no several times in several ways. And she goes, you found another way, you found another avenue. She goes, you never backed down. And she said, people get told no by these people in positions of authority. She goes, you never stopped. And she said, your tenacity and your son's willingness to come forward, you guys have saved thousands of lives. Those are her actual words. And then I lost it again, right? Because you don't realize or think that the stuff that you're doing at the time is going to have such a huge impact. I mean, I thought at the time, like, oh, this will have impact on other grooming cases. I never once was thinking trafficking. Not once. That wasn't even in my vernacular at the time, right? Like I wasn't even thinking about that. So to, again, think that we had a hand in all of this is just unreal. And the other thing too, Wisconsin put through in their law, they have enhanced penalty charges for people who are in positions of authority. So teachers, clergy, that sort of coaches. But I'm like, isn't every adult in a position of authority? Right? Yeah. Like you have your uncle coming to you and telling you these things. That person's in a position of authority. Like that's the one thing that kind of just rubs me so wrong. Like we should be looking out for these kids. There shouldn't be enhanced penalties for somebody in position of authority. These penalties should be so enhanced, just like Montana, to stop them from coming after our children. That's what they're coming after our kids every way they can. And that's how you take over the next generation, right? So we have to stand in that gap for them and don't have that fear. And that was the other thing is I believed my son. I lifted him up. I never made him feel bad or feel guilty for anything. And his friends were phenomenal. I had coached baseball from the time he was little. I played softball in college. So I coached his baseball teams. I was like this token, female coach. But his friends respected me. And so I think that might have helped also. Like they knew that he was a good person. They knew he was a good kid. Even kids that he never really jived with came up to him. And, kids that were very popular in school. My kid was kind of middle of the road, wasn't overly popular. It was just kind of, was at school. And so when you have some of these kids who are really popular coming up to you and saying, hey, I'm really sorry that happened to you. If there's anything you need, or if I can help you, let me know. Like that speaks volumes, right? That tells him that he's spot on with what's going on. Also, I was really livid when I found out that there were other kids before us. Mm. One in particular. And, but then I had to kind of take a step back, like, well, maybe he didn't have the support at home, right? Maybe they didn't know how to do this or go about it. So I actually did, though, go to that kid as an adult when we went to trial and asked him if he would testify with my son. And he didn't want to come forward at first because he was afraid it was going to hurt his, quote, political career because he was in politics at this time. And I said, the only way this hurts your political career is if people find out that you could have done something about this and you didn't. And I said, if this guy walks, I will keep your secret, but if this guy walks, all bets are off. And he picked up the phone right there in front of me, called the detective, and he ended up testifying with my son. So this was horrible. Like, I can't even tell you how bad our house was at the time. It was so...
I can't even imagine, Michelle, seriously. But the idea, I want to go back to this definition. I think you're 100% right. I think there has to be within the law, it has to have a special definition that just by virtue of age difference, that automatically implies authority, because children look to adults as authority figures, whether it's Uncle Bob or it's the coach, or they are, they don't have that sense of, they're not looking at themselves as based on what the person does, their career. Right. They're just an adult. So I think that's a really important point, that law has to define that anybody that is, over the age of a child is an authority. Listen, I'll tell you a ridiculous story. My daughter was a year and a half, like she wasn't even really speaking that much. And her older sister was 3. Okay, 2 years difference. And she comes into the den and she's got chocolate all over her face. And I said, oh, where did you get that? She goes, she points to her sister and said, Janice said I could have it. Now, to a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old was a person of authority.
Yeah.
And that's a
For sure.
silly, ridiculous thing. So now you're talking about things that affect what they're thinking, their emotions, and you're going to tell me that because they just have a job, no, it has to be
Right.
across the board.
Right. Yeah. And there has to be some sort of an international grooming law too, which after I get these 50 states, that'll be the next thing, because all of these kids that came up from this, across the southern border, their parents, their family was groomed, right? So they were groomed like, hey, we'll give you some money. We'll take your kids across the border. We'll give them a better life in the United States. So they probably offered them, $200-300, take their kids. That's grooming. And then they traffic their kids all the way up here. And then once they get in the United States, still trafficking them. So yeah, there needs to be some sort of an international grooming law as well.
Yeah, definitely. You must be very proud with what you've done in this, that your case is being used as a precedent for all these other cases, and the fact that you've written a mission statement for it. That must have made you, very proud.
Yeah, it was. I was, it also took me back to that whole time, and it was a lot. I can't tell you, but yeah, I am proud of what we're doing now. But again, none of this happens without God. Like, God has prepared me my entire life for this. As I told you, I played softball in college. So I was just telling this story yesterday. When there's a pitcher in front of me, my whole mindset was, I'm going to beat you. I don't care how good you are. I'm going to win. I'm going to beat you. I'm going to get a hit off of you. I'm going, you know what I mean? So my whole mindset, my entire life was, don't take no for an answer. You're going to come out on top every time. And I've done everything that way. I've been told I'm a bulldog, right? But I'm also like a very nice person. That's the thing that people are like, there's such this dichotomy. Like, if you will do anything for anybody. My son came by all of his stuff, honestly, right? I will do anything for anybody. I will help anybody. But you mess with my family, my friends who become family, look out, because I will be the best friend you've ever had. I will stand in the gap for the person who can't say anything or speak for themselves. I'm a huge patient advocate in the stuff that I do. So yeah, like, I have like this whole thing that I've been prepared for my entire life. And it's so strange how it's now all coming to this. Like, this was my why in this whole thing. When I say this whole thing, this thing called life, right? And when I started working on this again back in 2023, my son, who was 29 at the time, he looked at me, he's like, Mom, why are you doing this? He was so triggered by everything. He's like, you already saved me. And I looked at him, I said, okay, Satan. And he looked at me funny. I said, what better way would Satan like me to stop saving other children than to use the person I love the most to do it? And he said, okay. So we had this agreement that we wouldn't talk about it. He would ask me questions, but I would never really bring it up anymore, which was very hard for me, because even at 29 years old at the time, he said he would have never told me had I not overheard that conversation. Wow. Because he just wanted it to stop. And that was it. And of course, he knows how I am, right? So he knew probably at that point I wasn't going to stop, that I was going to take this guy down. So that's the thing is with parents, just believe your kids, have their backs. Don't ever make them feel guilty when something like this happens. Lift them up and let them know that they're the most important thing to you. Amy gave me a statistic, and she says 76% of the kids whose parents fight for them, especially the mothers whose parents fight for them in situations like this, become productive members of society. Mm-hmm. And the other ones tend to fail. So that's probably one of the other biggest lessons in just making sure that people understand like what this looks like. You know, you could just brush this off as this is just teenage hormones, right? My son was very withdrawn. He didn't want to go to school in the morning. I was having a very hard time getting him out to go to school, which that never really happened before. He was staying home a lot, wasn't doing things with his friends, and was going to the nurse several times and was having like this resting heart rate of like 120 to 130. The first time it happened, the nurse calls me and I'm like, well, just let him rest a minute and let him go back to class. I'm sure he's fine. Just kind of brush it off. I don't get overly excited about anything, especially medical things. People who are in medical field realize that we don't get very excited about medical things. So The fourth or fifth time this happened, though, she called me after she let him lay down and rest for about a half hour. She goes, he's been resting for a half hour. His heart rate's 120. Okay. Wow. So then I took him to a cardiologist. Of course, everything was fine. Now looking back, of course, it was anxiety. Like he didn't want to go to school. That's what it all was, you know? And the funny thing is the kid that was bullying him, even though we started all of this process, it was continuing. And one of my friends called me and she said, I know who your bully is. And I said, well, who is it? And so she told me, and she said she saw him flinging my son's bag when they came back from a game, once they got back to the school, flinging his bag across the courtyard. And she said, then Andrew went to go pick it up. He picked it up again and threw it again. Now this kid was probably 6'3". My son is 5'7". And I'd coached this kid in baseball. So at that point I kind of had it. And I became that parent. I went to they had a doubleheader, which in England, that's like they have 2 games in one day is what a doubleheader is. So I went there when they were warming up before the game. And you don't do this really as a parent ever, especially in high school. But I knew the coaches. I said, I need to talk to this particular kid. And they're like, okay. And they could tell I was hot. And so he comes out and I'm 5'1". He's 6'3". And I handed him the definition of a bully. And I said, you need to read this. And so he read it. His face got all red. I said, I know what you've been doing to my son and it stops today. We're going through hell at our house and this stays between us and I won't go to your parents because they will be completely disappointed in you. I said, but you will apologize to my son in front of all of his friends. You will not mention that we had this conversation and it stops today. And so that all that did happen. And so kids just don't realize what that whole thing does, the whole bullying thing. So parents, please teach your kids to be good people. Teach them to be nice.
It's so true. I have a funny story. So one of my friends, like I'm your height, you know, and she might even be shorter than us. Okay. And her kid was being bullied. She was little, like she was maybe 8 or 9, you know, she was like 10, something like that. And the mother had it, right? So she's my friend, and she went over to the house to the parents, and she's adorable. Like she's well put together, and she rings the bell and she's like, hi. She's like, I'm so-and-so's mom. She said, my name is whatever. She said, and you are so-and-so's mom? And she's like, yes, I am. And she shakes her hand. She said, okay, I just want to tell you, the next time your kid bullies and pushes my kid, I'm going to come over here and beat the shit out of you. And the mother was like, she said, anyway, have a great day. And she left. Kid never bullied her kid again.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Don't mess with the moms. I'm telling you.
No, I love your bulldog reference, and I want you to send me that logo when we finish, because I really want to have a good look at that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, because I think it was 6,000 text messages, wasn't it? And you said that if I only told you how many messages your son ignored that were coming in. So what was the ratio of text messages your son sent to the messages coming in from that teacher?
The ratio, I'm not sure, but significantly less than the teacher was sending to him.
Yeah.
Especially in the middle of the night. Like there would be a ton of messages coming in the middle of the night. My son wouldn't respond. Yeah. Hopefully because he was sleeping. But I guess that's the other thing too, is parents, take your kids' phones at night. Your kids don't need them after 9 o'clock. And if they say that they need it for the alarm clock, buy them an alarm clock.
Yeah.
So, right. I mean, if I would have had his phone, I would have seen those messages. The other thing too that is available to parents now, and on my website, again, at the bottom, there's an app that you can get. It's called the Bark app. And this, you can get it anywhere. I think you can get it internationally, but bark.com. So it's just like a dog barks, and you can set it up so that you get every message that goes in and out of your kid's phone can come to your phone. If you don't want every message, because you know that's all their silly messages they get, but you can set up for certain keywords, body parts, those types of things. They also have phones that you can get. So you can have a Bark phone, and they're smartphones. The nice thing about these phones, they have continuously running GPS in the background. People are like, oh, I have Life 360. I'm like, yep, and your kids can turn that off. They can't turn it off on this phone. It's continuously running and they cannot turn it off. So you know exactly where that phone is at every given minute. And you also have control over every app they put on that phone. You get an alert if they try to put another app on the phone, and you have to approve it. You have control over who they can call and who they can text. So you can set up so they can just call parents, call siblings, call grandma and grandpa, or their best friend. But they can't get messages or phone calls from anybody they don't know or anybody that's not on the phone. So the parents have complete control over that phone.
That's great.
So this is how the Montana law became a law. My cousin, who had been in the Navy when we were going through all of this, didn't realize our story. But then I told her later, and she watched a podcast and she learned about the Bark phone. So she buys her 13-year-old daughter the Bark phone. It was a matter of weeks. Her daughter has Snapchat. Mom gets an alert that she was getting messaged on Snapchat. And she then called me. She sent me some of the text messages. I'm like, oh, this is totally grooming. Like, you need to take it to your police department. She takes it to the police department. They told her essentially she needed to be a better parent. And I said, okay, take it to your local sheriff. So she takes it to the sheriff, kind of gets the same thing. I said, take it to your local FBI. Now, this guy had been trained by ICAC, which is Internet Crimes Against Children. He took the phone, scrubbed it, went through it, and found out that the person texting her was from Iowa. She lives in Montana. And I said, they'd just finished school. I said, did she have a Chromebook at school? And she said, yes. I said, can you go back to the school and grab that and see if he's messaging her on the Chromebook as well before they scrub it for the next year? So she did that, took that to the FBI, and sure enough, he was messaging her, got through the firewall at school, and was messaging her on the Chromebook. So they go after that guy, and that's taken care of. But I told her, I said, you need to get a rep or a senator in your state who will sponsor this bill. And so her boyfriend's cousin was a Democrat rep in Montana, just had a child. I said, ask her to sponsor this. I'm like, this should be a bipartisan issue. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. We all have children. So she took it and she goes, absolutely, I'll sponsor this. And so she, though, wasn't on the right committee. So she turned it over across the aisle to a Republican representative whose last name happens to be Love. She takes the bill then and she sponsored the grooming bill, and it passed the House and the Senate unanimously, even with those penalties of 100 years in prison, no chance of parole for the first 25. So that's how the Montana law became a thing. So that's the other reason I do these podcasts, is to find somebody in a state where there is not a grooming law, to see if they have a rep or a senator that they know personally, they can text and say, hey, there's a bill that you need to sponsor. Connect us, and we will help them get this passed. They can go on my website. They can pull anything they want from my website. As soon as you click on right there, like there's a tab at the top where it says current grooming laws, you can click on any one of those laws. It'll take you right to the Legiscan and take you right to that law. So they can take the verbiage off of there. They can use any part of the grooming law that I wrote for the federal level, take anything they want off of there, and we will help them. And I will come testify if I have to in any state. So I've testified in Indiana. I flew down to Tennessee to testify. They didn't get to our bill on that day when I was down there. But then somebody who lives in Tennessee read my statement when it went the following week. So I will come testify. I will do whatever I need to do. I will get with them on a Zoom call to walk them through what this needs to look like. I will give them our story and why it's so important and why it's so imperative for us to have a grooming law in all 50 states.
So do you know the disposition right now of what's happening in New York offhand?
They don't have a grooming law.
Well,
Nothing.
I know they don't have, I would assume they don't have one.
I don't have a rep or a senator. I have nobody.
Maybe we can figure that out together.
Yeah, I mean, a 100-year sentence and minimum of 25 years and the rest of your life monitored by satellite is a very, very good start, isn't it? For
it is
putting these people off. I mean, that sounds brilliant to me.
It is.
Throughout, just go back to the video you started. I mean, obviously, I know everyone needs a defense, but some of these people, lawyers and stuff that defend these people, just make my skin crawl, really. So what help or hindrance have you found on this journey? Because it sounds like the judge in the case was, really good, and you've had some good help. But how many people have been, what's the percentage there with help versus hindrance?
I would say percentage-wise, help is probably 70-30 split. 30% of the people aren't really willing to help. I kind of get, a hand in my face sometimes, or they just don't see the value of this. But then those are the folks that you question, right? For example, here in Illinois, so what happens in Illinois, you put a bill forward and it goes into a committee. That committee has to call it for a vote. In that committee, it has to pass out of committee then to go to the next level. It has been sitting in committee for 2 years, never called for a vote. I have it on good authority from someone who was actually in one of their meetings who she said that they were told to stand down and never call it for a vote. So I asked her, I said, so who told them to stand down? Was it J.B. Pritzker? And she said, well, J.B. Pritzker is our governor in Illinois. And she said it was either Pritzker or the Speaker of the House. And now, when you look into the Pritzker family, you have Tom Pritzker, who is the CEO of Hyatt Hotels, right? So he's in the Epstein files. And he's in Jeffrey Epstein's black book under 13 different phone numbers on page 45. His son, Tom Jr., is on the page before, also under 13 different phone numbers. You have J.B. Pritzker's cousin, who was James Pritzker, now goes by Jennifer Pritzker, who is a retired lieutenant colonel, I believe, or a colonel, lieutenant colonel maybe, from the National Guard, who transgendered. So now goes by Jennifer Pritzker. You have his cousin Penny, who was part of the Obama administration and part of the World Economic Forum, and did a speech for them back in, I think 2013 on public-private partnerships. So when you have people that are involved in this at the highest levels, they're going to try to stop you. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it was him or who it was that tried to get this to be stopped and never called for a vote out of committee. But that's a problem. So we've, tried to get some press on this and to highlight it a little bit. J.B. Pritzker was also named by Clinton during his trial here not too long ago, saying that he was on the Lolita Express with him, but it was for a Clinton initiative. They didn't go to the island. But, it sounds bad, but it's almost guilt by association, right? So when you have people that are involved in this, they'll stop you. So that's my biggest question is when I have a rep or a senator that's pushing back against this, I'm like, so are you involved? Right? We had only in the state of Wisconsin, I think there were 6 people that voted against the grooming law. So I told them, I said, you need to look into those 6 people. Why are they trying to stop a law from going forward that protects children? Every other state, it passed unanimously in the House and the Senate, because here's the thing is most people, once this comes for vote, are not going to vote against it publicly, because that's the first thing you think of is like, oh, are you involved? Right. So that's why they don't ever want it to be called for a vote, because then you have to actually vote on it in public.
Wow. It takes you back to George Carlin, doesn't it? It's a big club. And you ain't in it.
And you ain't in it, right?
Yeah.
And, we've all heard a lot about J.B. Pritzker over the last few years, especially, with Trump and what he's been saying and stuff. But, I haven't dug into his family like you do, but it sounds like a right horror show, doesn't it?
Right. I mean, and they've been coming after Trump for so long, right? Ever since he announced. But here's the thing is he is the only president to sign 9 bills into law. 3 of those were given to him by a Democrat. So these are bipartisan bills to protect children. One of them is Executive Order 13818, which actually will seize the assets of anybody who is convicted of trafficking. So if you have somebody who's going to seize your assets, why would you like that guy?
Right, exactly.
So you can go and look, I don't know if you guys have done this, I'm sure you have, but you look at the Rothschilds, they're selling off their castles and stuff. So did this actually come into fruition and we just didn't know about it? I don't know, but there's a lot of people selling their assets. So is it actually them selling it, or did the U.S. government seize those assets and they're selling them?
And a lot of
no idea.
Have died, they've had heart attacks and stuff like that. So you have to go far back, right?
Right.
We believe Trump and the military, this alliance that's going on behind the scenes, has been taking care of a lot of this for years, and we just haven't seen the real big public rollout of it all yet. But there's so much work being done behind the scenes to go into the tunnels and eradicate all this criminality and stuff. So we are very positive about the future, especially with Trump getting in and writing executive orders all about election interference and human rights and stuff. Yeah, it's superb stuff.
Well, I know people are frustrated with him because they're like, oh, there's nothing in those files. We don't need anything in the files, right? But by him doing that, now he has everybody clamoring for the files, right? So everybody on the right, left, middle, everybody wants these files now. So people need to kind of look at the bigger picture. Like, did he do that on purpose? So people are now asking for the files. You know what I mean? So that's what you got to kind of look at, and just hope that some of these things are actually happening in the background. But I don't know. It's very frustrating. But I've had a lot of help and support from General Michael Flynn with America's Future, Mary Flynn O'Neill. They've given me a platform to speak about this stuff. Everyone's, is General Flynn a good guy or a bad guy? Blah, blah. Like, I don't know. And, I'm kind of over all of that at this point. You know them by their fruits, right? General Flynn has been out there on the front lines. He's speaking about all of this. He's talked about the human and child trafficking. So he's been nothing but good to me. He's been very supportive of me. So is General Flynn a good guy? He is, in my eyes.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, I do believe, and this is a little bit comical really, that the two of the main generals we've seen publicly talking about Trump in the early days and the Q operation and stuff was General Flynn and Admiral Rogers. And I say to myself, I reckon I had a little coin toss, right? General Flynn was the public face and Admiral Rogers is working behind the scenes, because General Flynn says all the time, I've forgotten what it says. Local action, national impact. Yeah. And he's constantly trying to rile the people up to get involved and do something. Right. It doesn't matter how big or small a part you play. You've just got to get involved. It's in the Q drops, military-civilian alliance. We are all trying to work together, and we, the people, need to rise in everywhere around the world, in every department, schooling, the medical industry, all stuff.
But again, like this money, like it funds everything they do, right? It's a $350+ billion a year industry. So it's funding their election fraud. It's funding their medical fraud. It funds everything. People need to look into the Club of Rome. They need to look into the International Monetary Fund. They need to look into these entities that say that they're looking out for our best interests. The World Economic Forum, that's one of the most public facing entities that has actually been so evil and wicked. And when you think about this, when they came to be in 1971, they pushed the whole women's movement, right? So the women's movement, hey, you're just as special and just as good as the guys are. You need to get out there and work. So now they're taxing the other half of society. They've gotten the kids away from them. They put them in, more of the government public schools before care and after school care. So now they have more time with our kids to indoctrinate them. Like this was all a plan from the beginning. And, the whole women's movement and all of that is just unbelievable. They've played us all, right? And we fell right into it. But when you start waking up to all of this and you start pushing back a little bit, it's so funny because people who aren't awake to this, they're so happy. Like they have no idea that anything's going on, right? Well, we're all like, oh my gosh, like how do you not see any of this? The chemtrails, the grooming of our kids in schools, the whole transgender thing, the abortion issue, all of it. Even here when Roe v. Wade was overturned, everyone's like, oh, Trump doesn't want to give women's rights. No, Trump, they just pushed it back to the states. The states have control over that now.
Yeah.
These
women have
no idea.
They have no idea. And they don't understand. What's so sad is that they look at it as something they need rather than they've been exploited, because even the suffragettes way back were against abortion because they felt that was an exploitation of women and the godly gift they had to bear children. And they've just brainwashed a whole generation of women to think that that's, a great thing.
Right. You look at the whole thing about depopulation, right? You look at the vaccines separately, you look at the abortion issue separately, you look at the transgenderism of kids separately, but you put them all together, it's all a depopulation event, right?
Yeah.
You take away their sex organs, they can't have children, right? So it's all that. Like when you look at it together from a 40,000 foot view, you're like, oh my gosh, like they're trying to wipe us all out. And so I think again, but it starts locally. Like when you see this stuff going on in your schools and you're not pushing back, you are at fault. Like people should be going to all of these board meetings, school board meetings, council meetings, county meetings, really getting involved. This is a funny story. I went to one of my county meetings one time and this was right after J.B. Pritzker did this whole gun grab law here. And then he traveled off to Davos that weekend and to tout his gun grab law. And I called our county board at the time, called the board president. I said, are you familiar with the World Economic Forum? No clue. Like, so if he doesn't know about the World Economic Forum, probably the rest of the board doesn't know about the World Economic Forum, right? And I told him that I had to come and give a public comment. Typically, they allow 3 minutes. And I said, so if I keep speaking, will they stop me? And he said, I doubt it if you kept going. So I brought 80 people with me there that day. It was on Valentine's Day. And everybody wore red. And when I started speaking, they all stood up, so they knew that they were all with me. Now, at these meetings, there's probably a handful of people. When I walked in with like 80 people, they were like, they had to get extra chairs. Like, what is going on? And I went on for 12 minutes and no one stopped me. But I tied the Pritzkers back to the World Economic Forum, tied the whole COVID thing together with the whole transgenderism thing in this 12-minute speech. And of course, at first, they all thought I was crazy. And I then emailed them all of my information and all of my research. So they had it at their fingertips. They can go look at it if they wanted to. And then I went to another meeting to talk to them about doing an ordinance in the county that if somebody is charged with grooming, they couldn't take a plea bargain. And so I went to go present that at this meeting. I walk in, there's like 100 people there. I'm like, what's going on, right? So I looked at the agenda and solar panel farms are on there, which is part of the agenda, right? So I'm like 10th person signed up for public comment, but I was there to speak about nothing that they were talking about. But I went to the solar panel farm company and went to their donors and rolled it all back up to the World Economic Forum because 3 of their donors were from the World Economic Forum. And so when I went to go speak about what I wanted to talk about was Andrew's Law and what was going on and what had happened to my son, there were so many people that had no idea that this even happened in Morris, let alone Grant County. And when I started telling them all of this, I turned then and looked at the audience and I said, I'm going to tie this now to what you're here for. I said, because this is all an agenda from the World Economic Forum. It's about age gap love and minor attracted people. And this is being pushed down by Klaus Schwab, who's the CEO, who is also pushing the solar panel farms because 3 of the donors from this company itself roll right up to the World Economic Forum. So it's all connected. And I looked at the attorneys that were sitting there and I said, if you guys think you're getting out of 15-minute cities, you're sadly mistaken because you're working for the enemy. And then I like walked off, like many people stood up and clapped, right? And I went back to the back and one of the sheriffs said, or it was actually the fire chief, he said, probably not the best day to come speak about what you want to talk about. I'm like, oh, this was the perfect night to speak about what I want to talk about because those 100 people would have never heard our story otherwise. And now I've tied this all together. So this is all an agenda. The solar panel farms, the data centers, all of it, right? Like it's an agenda. So
yeah.
Wow.
This was so, we're so happy you were able to come on today. And I'm just trying to be mindful of your time because I know you,
yes,
you have to get to work and you take time out to go on these podcasts and educate people about the work you've done. So we really appreciate your time.
It's a shame more people aren't paying attention, isn't it? Because they're still being kept busy with the bread and circus. And we're trying to bring them away from it. All my mates still talking about football. You know, it doesn't matter what I tell them, really. But there you go. It's coming. We need a big event, not for us, for the normies on the TV, some big arrest or something like that, or some big scare event to really jolt them out of their slumber. But it's coming, and we've warned them again and again and again. So let's just keep our fingers crossed, be very positive for the future. But yeah, it's been amazing listening to you. It's when we have a guest on like yourself, it's just lovely to sit here and listen to you and tell your story. And
thank you. I appreciate you guys having me. And also on my website, there's an education page on there too, where parents can pull off some education about what to look for. And education for the kids.
MICHELLPETERSON.org, isn't it? And which bit?
So where it says education right in the middle.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, great.
And so there's information right there that just takeaways. I mean, anybody can print that right off of there.
Oh, that's good. That's easily downloadable.
I tried to make my website just like a landing page, so that people can go in there and take whatever they need. There's nothing proprietary. Like, I don't care. I just want kids to be saved. I want parents to know what to do, grandparents to know what to do to save their kids. I will give myself a little bit of a plug, though. There is a donate button on there. I do all of this out of my own pocket. So if anybody is able to donate, that would be fantastic. I think all of my vacation time the last 3 years has all been the good majority of it, probably 90% of it's been used on this type of stuff, which is a great investment. But I could use some help if anybody's willing to help.
It costs money to go to all these things and speak and put the time in, of course.
Right. Yeah. And if people can't afford to do that, please just pray. Pray that this becomes law in every state, and that we get an international grooming law put in place as well. And maybe we can even do something over in England, start with a grooming law over there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Definitely. Well, and there's many of us out there, you know, in a similar situation, that we're doing this out of love for the truth coming out, and none of us get paid for it. And you know, we're all going to need a little bit of help sometime potentially. But yeah, if anyone can donate to Michelle, that would be absolutely wonderful. And if not, pray. Yeah.
And you were asking about my logo. It's actually on my website too, so you can see it on the website. The logo's on there.
Oh, great. All right, I'll find that in a bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, thank you.
We would like to get Mary Flynn on sometime, and we'd love to have our brother on as well, obviously. But
yes.
You know, it'd be great. These Monday shows are all dedicated, you know, in Mark's honour to carrying on his legacy, talking about the children and grooming and all sorts of things. So, you know, we love doing this, and we love helping out, and we love all our guests. So thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Okay, brilliant. All right. Well, thank you, everyone in the chat. We shall see you tomorrow, and we've got Mark's little outro with all his links, and where we go, one we go, all people. We'll see you soon. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I will be the last to fall. I won't shed a tear for them to see. I won't have your name to call, 'cause I will be the last to fall.